My son texted me, "You're not coming on the cruise. Sarah wants it to just be a family trip." Just like that. I had just handed them the keys to a fully paid-off house, a home I bought with every penny I had. I was good enough to fund their life, but not welcome on their vacation. That's when I knew they'd made a mistake. My name is Carol Lynn Parker. I'm 68 years old. And if you had asked me a year ago, I would have told you I understood love, especially a mother's love. I thought I knew its shape, its weight, and what it could cost. I was wrong. I didn't know a thing. Now I sit here at this kitchen table watching the morning sunlight stretch across the floor. It's the kind of strong golden light that makes the honey-colored oak planks glow like they've got a soul of their own. I still call it my kitchen. Funny how those words come so easily. But the truth is, it isn't mine. Not anymore. I'm holding this warm mug in both hands, the smooth porcelain soft against my skin, but my eyes are drifting around the room, taking stock of everything. The old oak chairs I hunted down one by one at flea markets, running my hands along the grain until I found a set that felt like home. The golden yellow curtains I sewed myself, nights filled with the hum of my old Singer machine, imagining how the soft light would spill through them in the mornings. Every inch of this room holds a memory. Every corner echoes with something I gave. I built this home piece by piece for my son, David, and his wife, Sarah. I can still feel the warmth of that spring day when we threw the housewarming party. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass and my mother's sweet potato pie recipe baked in the oven. All our friends from church came. Their laughter filled the room, bouncing off the newly painted walls. I stood right here by this very counter, feeling so proud I could burst, watching David raise his glass and thank everyone for coming to their new home. I just smiled. I'd done it. I had sold my own place. The little brick ranch where my husband and I raised our boy, where David had taken his very first steps. I took everything from that sale and bought this house outright. No mortgage. No debt. Just a clean start. It wasn't just my savings I gave up. It was my safety net, my whole future, all wrapped up in one piece of paper with their names written on it in fancy letters. It was the biggest gift I had ever given. And then there was Sarah. I remember how she floated over to me that day, tears shining in her eyes. She took my hands, holding them tight, her voice trembling as she said, "Oh, Carol, you didn't have to do this. We're so grateful. You'll always have a room here, okay? This is your home too." I believed her. Lord, I soaked up those words like water in the desert. I made them my truth. I really did. I remember sleeping here alone in the weeks before they moved in, surrounded by boxes and the smell of fresh paint. I can still feel the ache in my back from painting their bedroom walls a soft shade of lavender because Sarah once said it helped her relax. I remember fighting with the IKEA instructions for their bed frame, my fingers sore from twisting those tiny screws, but telling myself it would be worth it just to see the looks on their faces. I bought the coziest quilts I could find at Macy's, imagining them curled up warm on chilly nights. I told myself this was what mothers did. We made homes. As time went on, I found new ways to help. I created a rhythm of giving that became the background hum of my life. I canceled a dream trip to New Orleans I'd been planning for years, had the brochure taped to my fridge and everything, just so I could stay home and watch their little terrier Max when they went to the Bahamas on a whim. I emptied the last of my retirement fund to wipe out the remaining chunk of David's student loans so they could start fresh. On Tuesday nights, I'd show up with a hot casserole, usually chicken and broccoli, whenever Sarah said she was too tired to cook. I was always ready. Always dependable. For a long time, I think I confused being needed with being loved. That's an easy trap to fall into when you look at a wall like the one in their hallway. It's covered with glossy family photos. Everyone's smiling. There's one from Disney World with the castle in the background. That was my wedding gift to them. I remember the humidity and how Sarah fussed about her hair, but in the picture she's glowing. Another from Cancun on a beach at sunset, an anniversary trip I booked for them. And then there's last Christmas, all of us in matching plaid pajamas in a cabin up in the mountains I'd rented for the week. I'm in all the pictures, usually on the edge of the frame, smiling just as big as everyone else. I kept giving, kept explaining away the little things. When they didn't call for a week, I told myself they were busy building their careers. When they forgot my birthday, I told myself they had too much going on. I lived inside a warm, sunlit dream I'd paid for and decorated myself. I didn't see that somewhere along the way I'd stopped being their mother and had become something else. A resource. A wallet. And I was about to find out that the wallet was being closed for good. It all began to fall apart on a Tuesday morning. It was the kind of autumn day that makes you feel hopeful. Crisp air, golden light, the windows wide open. I was sitting in the sunroom, the one I'd insisted they add because I thought it would be the perfect place to have our morning coffee together. I was on my second cup of Earl Grey, enjoying the steam on my face and flipping through a travel brochure. Not for me, for them. In 3 weeks, they were headed off on a Royal Caribbean cruise to the Western Caribbean. 7 days. It had been my idea. My gift to celebrate David's promotion at work. I'd been daydreaming about it for months. I imagined myself on the ship's deck, a soft breeze in my hair, nothing but blue water stretching out in every direction. I pictured evenings playing rummy with David just like we used to when he was a little boy. I imagined laughing with Sarah over dessert, maybe even getting her to open up a little. Just the two of us relaxing under the stars. I'd already bought a new floral sundress and a wide-brimmed straw hat, both tucked neatly in my closet, waiting for the trip. I was just a mother looking forward to a real vacation, a true celebration with her kids. That's when I heard my phone chime. It was sitting on the wicker side table beside me, and the sharp sound cut through the peaceful morning like a blade. I smiled, thinking maybe it was David. My heart fluttered just a little. Maybe he had a question about the shore excursions. Or maybe he was just excited like I was and wanted to share it. I picked up the phone and slid my thumb across the screen. The message blinked up at me. Simple, clean, stark black letters on a bright white background. Hey Mom. Just confirming final plans. You won't be joining us on the family cruise. Sarah feels it's important that this is a family-only trip. I read it once. Then again. The words sat there cold and blunt. It felt like I was reading another language. One I almost understood but not quite. The warmth from my tea vanished. A cold shock hit me in the chest and spread outward like ice straight to my fingertips. My ears began to ring, drowning out the ticking clock on the wall. Family only. The phrase echoed through the quiet space like a bell in an empty hall. I looked around the sunroom, the soft armchair I was sitting in, the lush fern I watered every other day, the cozy ceiling fans spinning gently above me. All of it. Everything under this roof had been a gift from me. I was the reason they had this life. And yet I wasn't family enough to join them on a vacation. The woman who gave them a home, who funded their new beginning. I wasn't included. Before I could even start to process it, another chime broke through the silence. This time it was Sarah. Her name flashed across the screen and my stomach twisted. Her message was different, wrapped in politeness but somehow even colder. Hi Carol, just wanted to follow up. I really hope you understand. It's just that things will be much simpler for everyone this way. Simpler. That was the word that shattered me, not in some dramatic explosion but with a slow, sickening crack deep inside. Of course it was simpler for her. It was simpler to enjoy the house without the mother-in-law who came with it. Simpler to enjoy the fruits of my life's work without having to look at the person who'd planted the seeds. The hard part, my sacrifice, was over. Now she could enjoy the easy part, the sweet part, without me in the picture. I set the phone down carefully. My hand was steady but it didn't feel like mine anymore. I stared out the window at the bright, cloudless sky, but I didn't see anything. There were no tears. The shock had gone too deep for tears. It was like something inside me turned off. A switch flipped. The part of me that always made excuses. The part that brushed off the coldness and said, "They're just busy. They still love you." That part. It died right then and there. For the first time I saw them clearly. My son. His wife. Who they really were. My finger hovered over the screen. What could I say? What would be the point of begging? My pride, the last thing they hadn't stripped away, wouldn't allow it. I typed one word. Okay. And I hit send. That one word flew out into the silence like a white flag. But I wasn't giving up. No. In my heart it wasn't surrender. It was the start of something else. Something stronger. The words I didn't send were the ones that burned inside me like acid. So I was good enough to sign over the deed that gave you a home, but not good enough to sit on your boat? The rest of that day I moved through the house like a ghost. I didn't eat. I didn't answer the phone. I just sat in my room, the one with the lavender walls I had painted myself, and stared at the same spot until the sun went down. The shock froze me. Locked me in place like I was stuck inside a block of ice. But the thaw came the next morning. Fully. It started with one phone call. One I almost didn't have the strength to make. I called Kathy. My best friend since we were skinny-legged girls with pigtails and scraped knees. She's the one person on this planet who can hear what I don't say louder than what I do. She was at my door in 20 minutes, holding a container of her famous chicken noodle soup. She didn't ask questions. She didn't even speak at first. Just took one look at my face, set the soup down and wrapped her arms around me. I didn't cry. Still couldn't. I just stood there frozen stiff. Then I handed her my phone. She read both texts, David's and Sarah's. Her eyes darkened with every line. Her jaw clenched so tight I saw the little muscle twitch near her temple. When she finally looked up, her face had gone hard. They planned this, Carol, she said quietly, her voice burning. This wasn't last minute. A small, shaky voice inside me still tried to defend them. I think maybe it's just Sarah, I said, barely a whisper. David wouldn't. Kathy cut me off with a sharp shake of her head. No. Stop that. Stop shrinking yourself for them. You've been doing it for years. And they've gotten used to seeing you that way, small, silent, and on the floor like a damn welcome mat. Her eyes locked on mine. When's the last time you looked at your bank statements? Really looked? That question stuck with me long after she left. She followed me to my room. Sat beside me all afternoon. And when I found myself wide awake at 2 a.m., it was still there, ringing in my ears. The house was dark and silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. I crept into the little office nook and powered up my old laptop, the one I hadn't touched in ages. It was covered in dust. For the last couple of years, Sarah had been handling my online banking. She'd offered all sweet and helpful. It's too complicated, Mom, she'd said. Let me help. It's no trouble. Back then it felt like love. Now it felt like something else. Something darker. My hands trembled slightly as I typed in the password. The screen lit up, casting pale light across my face. I opened the account history and started scrolling. At first, everything looked fine. My social security checks, the mortgage payment I'd let them make as rent, groceries. But then I noticed them, tiny recurring transfers. $100 marked as lawn care. $200 listed as home maintenance. $50 for pest control. Small charges. Just enough to slip under the radar. But I hadn't approved a single one. I always paid for lawn care by check. There hadn't been a maintenance issue in months. My heart started pounding in my chest. I clicked deeper into the account settings. There it was. In black and white. Authorized user, Sarah Miller. She had full access. She'd been quietly draining money from my account, bit by bit like a leaky faucet I never noticed. My savings, my safety net, the one thing meant to keep me safe in old age. It was all being siphoned away behind my back. By morning, the numbness had given way to something hard and cold. I called my financial advisor, Mr. Whitaker, a kind man who's been managing my retirement for over 2 decades. I told him everything, my voice flat and even. He listened, then said carefully, "Well, Carol, looking at the activity, it appears your secondary account holder, Ms. Sarah Miller, has been making these transactions. She has full access under the durable power of attorney you signed last spring." And just like that, I remembered it all. Sarah standing in the kitchen, a folder in her hand. "It's just a formality," she chirped, smiling wide. "This just lets me help you with bills and things, just in case of an emergency." She'd been so efficient, so considerate. Sarah even brought the notary to the house herself, just so I wouldn't have to go out. I signed where she told me to, trusting her without a second thought. But now everything was laid bare. Stark. Ugly. This wasn't about missing out on a cruise. This wasn't about a misunderstanding or even hurt feelings. This was theft, calculated, deliberate theft, wrapped in the sweet language of love and concern. My retirement wasn't their inheritance. Not yet. But they'd been spending it like it was. They assumed my silence meant approval. They believed my love meant permission. But they were wrong. The woman who sat in stunned silence, staring blankly at the wall, was gone. The one who whispered weak excuses and clung to hope like a lifeline? He was gone too. The morning after I spoke to Mr. Whitaker, someone new woke up in my body. She was calm. She was clear. And she was ready. I was dressed and out the door before the sun had even risen. I drove into downtown Fairview and parked across the street from the law offices of Dalton and Finch. The city was just starting to wake up, but inside my mind there was no chaos, just a single sharp objective. As soon as I saw the lights flicker on inside the building, I stepped out of the car and walked straight to the front door. I was already waiting on the steps when Mr. Dalton arrived, briefcase in one hand, coffee in the other. He looked startled to see me. "Carol, is everything all right?" We sat down in the big leather chairs in his office, the air filled with the scent of fresh coffee and the dusty comfort of old books. I didn't waste a second on small talk. I met his eyes and said, steady and cold, "I want to reverse the gift of the house." He blinked, set his coffee down slowly. "Carol, that's a serious move. A property gift isn't something the court undoes lightly. It could cause real family fallout." A tight, bitter smile touched my lips. "They've already caused the fallout, Mr. Dalton. I was just too blind to see it. They've been draining my retirement, hiding behind a power of attorney I signed in good faith." His whole posture changed. This wasn't a heartbroken mother anymore. This was a legal client with a case. He leaned forward. "Serious now. Tell me everything." So I did. I laid it all out. The bank statements. My call with Mr. Whitaker. The messages. All of it. I spoke like I was reading a repair manual, not a woman describing the betrayal of her only child. I want every financial action they've taken under my name documented. Every charge. Every wire. Every dollar. He nodded, eyes dark with concern. "We'll issue subpoenas. We'll need solid proof if this goes further." "It will go further," I said flatly. It wasn't a guess. It was a fact. He steepled his fingers and looked at me carefully. "Given what you've described, you might want to consider hiring a private investigator. This isn't just bad judgment. Sarah is maneuvering for long-term control. A PI could uncover hidden assets or future plans." The old me would have balked at that, would have felt ashamed, like admitting my family had failed. But not the woman sitting in that office. She saw it for what it was, strategy. "Do it," I said without hesitation. "Hire someone you trust. Send me the bill." When I walked out of his office, I felt lighter than I had in years. The crushing weight of denial was gone. I had a plan now and a spine of steel to carry it. A few days later, while David and Sarah were likely sipping cocktails on the cruise I had paid for, I found it. A plain white envelope slid under the front door. No postage. Delivered by hand. Inside there was a thick stack of paperwork. Bold letters across the top. "Irrevocable, durable power of attorney." This wasn't the same document I had signed before. This one was permanent. Sweeping. Attached with a paperclip was a sticky note in Sarah's bubbly handwriting. "Hi Mom, just some final papers to sign when you're ready. This'll just make things easier for us to manage while we're away. Love, Bess." Even on vacation they were still playing the game. The audacity knocked the breath right out of me. This wasn't a convenience, it was a cage. I read every line, every clause. My blood ran cold. It gave the holder full power over all my finances, all medical decisions, my property, even access to safety deposit boxes. I wouldn't be able to revoke it. Ever. I didn't scream. I didn't tear it up. I put the papers right back in the envelope, got in my car and drove straight back to Mr. Dalton's office. I laid it on his desk. He read every word, his eyebrows rising inch by inch. "They're getting bold," he said finally. "And sloppy. If you'd signed this," he continued, "they could have sold this house from under you. Emptied your accounts. All while you were still living in it. Then we move now," I said. My voice like steel. "File the petitions. Freeze everything. Lock it all down." The days that followed were a strange in-between. I watered the houseplants. I dusted. I played the role they expected of me, the quiet, harmless mother who didn't know any better. But behind the scenes, Mr. Dalton was filing legal petitions, and a man I had never met was quietly digging into the life my son and daughter-in-law had built on the back of my generosity. I was a queen in exile, living inside a kingdom that should have been mine, waiting for my army to assemble. 2 days later the phone rang. It was nearly midnight. The house was steeped in that heavy silence that only comes in the deepest part of night. I was sitting in my chair, not reading, just thinking. My phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. My entire body went rigid. I already knew who it was. I answered, calm and quiet. "This is Carol." The voice on the other end was steady. Professional. A man's voice, low and crisp. "Mrs. Parker," he said. "I apologize for the hour. but I figured you'd want this information as soon as possible. Without thinking, I got up and closed the curtains on the living room window. It felt dramatic, like something from a spy movie, but it also felt necessary. This wasn't public. This was war. Go ahead, I said quietly. Your daughter-in-law, Sarah Miller, he began, shuffling papers in the background, has recently listed your home address as collateral for a second mortgage. I stopped breathing. My lungs just forgot how. Second mortgage. On the house I paid for in full. The house that was meant to give them a debt-free future. They were tying debt to my gift. Using my sacrifice as a lever. Desecrating it. She's already entered the pre-approval stage with a private lender, he went on. The paperwork was filed last week, right before they left on their cruise. Deliberate. Timed. Ruthless. They intended to come back from vacation with the money already in hand, built on my back using my house. And I would have been none the wiser. Just the sweet old mother-in-law quietly living in the guest room. But they weren't just stealing from me. They were using my love to build an empire of debt in their name. They were weaponizing my sacrifice, my trust, my motherhood. Did they explain how they got the title to the house? I asked, my voice tight with tension. Yes, ma'am, the investigator replied. They presented it as a simple family gift. No mention of coercion. In fact, the lender noted how impressed they were with the strength of their family support system. That phrase, family support system, hit me like a slap. I bit the inside of my cheek hard, the sharp sting helping me stay grounded. They had turned my generosity into a sales pitch. They'd taken my sacrifices and polished them into a false story of unity and love, making themselves look like blessed, grateful children instead of what they really were, thieves in disguise. They were stacking up debt loan by loan, on top of the very foundation I'd built with love, and doing it with smiles on their faces. One final question surfaced in my mind, one that would shape the course of everything to come. Do they have any idea I know this? I asked, barely breathing. Anyone, Mr. Dalton, the bank? No, ma'am, the investigator said with calm certainty. The information was gathered through discreet sources. As far as they know, you're still home, completely unaware. They think you're the same woman they left behind. I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Relief. Pure, sharp, and empowering. It was like being handed the enemy's battle plans before they'd even fired a shot. They were out in the Caribbean sun, drinking fruity cocktails, thinking they'd won. They had no idea the board had already been flipped and I wasn't playing their game anymore. A small, cold smile crept across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who's been cornered for too long, and just realized they're holding a blade. Good, I said, my voice cool and steady. Let's keep it that way. Let them enjoy their vacation. I ended the call and stood in the darkness for a long time. Whatever had been soft and forgiving in me had turned to stone. The last trace of motherly affection, that hopeful part still clinging to the idea of family, it was gone. You gambled with my gift, Sarah, I thought. You took my love and bet everything on me staying silent. Well, now I'm gambling with your future. The days that followed moved like clockwork. The grief and the anger had been stripped down and refined into something harder. Purpose. Every morning at 9 o'clock sharp I walked into Mr. Dalton's office. His big conference room became my war room. That long, polished mahogany table, once intimidating, now felt like mine. Every surface was covered in carefully organized stacks of paper. Bank statements, credit card summaries, retirement account reports, and the investigator's findings. We went through everything line by line. Every charge, every transfer. What began as a handful of suspicious transactions quickly revealed itself to be a full-blown operation. Sarah hadn't just misused my trust. She'd launched a financial attack. I saw the Nordstrom purchases, the spa weekend she'd booked under her name. I saw how she used my retirement funds to pay off her credit cards. And she didn't even bother to cover her tracks. He thought I'd never look. He thought I'd never ask. We found regular transfers going straight from my savings into a private investment account, under Sarah's name. She had been using my life's work, my savings from 4 decades as a high school administrator, to build her own wealth. Mr. Dalton highlighted each fraudulent charge in yellow. Before long, the pages were glowing, sickening seas of yellow ink. He shook his head as he worked, his face a blend of professional disgust and personal anger. This is no longer about poor judgment, Carol, he said one afternoon. This is elder financial abuse. Plain and simple. And it's a strong case. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I just nodded, eyes fixed on the mountain of evidence. They didn't want me gone, Mr. Dalton, I said, voice calm. They just wanted me controlled. Like a bank account with arms. Someone who funds their life but doesn't speak up. Someone they can leash and unleash at will. He nodded. His voice was steady, certain. Well, they're not going to get away with it. Then the day came. The day everything we'd worked for, every affidavit, every filing, every plan, was ready. The paperwork sat on the conference table neatly stacked, waiting. The titles read like armor. Petition to reverse property gift. Formal revocation of financial access. Asset protection and trust formation. Mr. Dalton pushed a fountain pen across the table. It's all here, he said. Once you sign, we file everything immediately. The house, the accounts, the trust. It will all be secured under your name alone. I picked up the pen. It felt heavier than I expected, but right in my hand. For a moment I thought my hand might tremble. After all, this was the son I had raised. Defended. But when I looked down at that signature line, there was no hesitation. There was only clarity. I signed my name. Carolyn Parker. One stroke at a time, the weight began to lift. The second signature felt easier. Then the third. With every page I was rebuilding my freedom. The only sound in the room was the pen moving across thick legal paper. The sound of a woman reclaiming her life. When I finished, I put the cap back on the pen and leaned back. It's done, Mr. Dalton said gently, collecting the documents. The reversal is official. The house is yours again. Every account they touched is frozen. The new trust is secure. They can't reach it. I stood and walked to the window, watching the traffic roll down the street. I checked the time. In 4 days their cruise ship would dock in Miami. They'd come back tan and cheerful, completely unaware. They didn't know the locks had already been changed. They didn't know the house they believed was theirs now legally belonged to me again. They didn't know the money they were stealing had been rerouted, placed in a trust under a new name, safe forever. The fortress was up. And they were sailing straight toward it. That Saturday morning I was ready. I parked down the street under the big maple tree. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry. I was calm, cold and clear. I was a woman waiting for the final scene of a play she had written with her own 2 hands. Around 10 o'clock their silver SUV pulled into the driveway. From where I sat I could see everything. Sarah stepped out from the passenger side, glowing. Her skin bronzed, her body relaxed, her lips curled into that smug little smile as she stretched in the sunlight. David got out first, walking to the trunk to unload their sleek, expensive suitcases. The very ones I'd bought them for their honeymoon. They both looked tan, rested and smug, like a couple who believed the world belonged to them. But then they stopped cold. Their heads snapped up in unison. Their smiles vanished. I watched them take in the scene. 2 unfamiliar cars were parked in the driveway. A large moving truck sat at the curb with its ramp down. Standing by the front door, deep in cheerful conversation with a real estate agent, was a young couple, mid-30s if I had to guess. The woman gestured toward the rose bushes I'd planted myself, and the man chuckled, slipping his arm around her shoulder. They looked like hope. They looked like the future. There was no sound on my side of the street, but I could feel the tremor of shock hit David and Sarah like a wave. The perfect vacation glow they carried was cracking. Their world had just shifted beneath them. I opened my car door slowly, deliberately, and stepped out. I smoothed the front of my dress, took in a long breath of cool autumn air, and crossed the street without hurry. The quiet click of my sensible heels against the pavement was the only sound. I let them see me. I let them feel every second of my approach. David noticed me first. The confusion on his face drained into something else. Something heavier. Dread. "Mom," he whispered like a ghost trying to speak. Sarah's eyes narrowed, flashing with rage. Her hands shot to her hips. She turned away from the house and locked her glare on me. "What is going on here, Carol?" she snapped, her voice sharp and venomous. "Who are these people? What is that truck doing here?" As if perfectly timed, the front door clicked shut behind the young couple. The sound echoed across the street. The agent gave them a thumbs up and walked away. I stopped 10 feet from them, standing just at the edge of what used to be their lawn. I gave them a polite, neutral smile. Then I spoke, my voice cool and clear as a winter sky. "Well, Sarah," I said calmly, I guess you won't have to worry about managing anything for me anymore. Her face twisted with rage. She stepped forward, voice rising to a shrill screech. You can't do this. We're in the middle of refinancing. You don't have the right. She didn't realize it yet, but she had just handed me everything I needed. Her panic exposed the truth. Her greed had made her reckless. I reached into my handbag, the large, structured one I had chosen for this moment, and pulled out a thick folder bound with a rubber band. It was heavy with paper, but even heavier with truth. These, I said, lifting the folder, are the only contracts that matter now. I stepped around her and handed it directly to David. I watched his hands tremble as he peeled away the band and opened it. His eyes darted across the pages. His fingers clutched the paper so tightly the edges bent beneath them. I stood still, watching him read every word. The reversal of the deed, the bill of sale signed by the new owners, the investigators' report detailing every dollar they stole, the mortgage application filed without my consent. The world he'd built on lies and my love was dissolving in his hands. He looked up at me, wide-eyed and pale like a frightened child. But before he could speak, Sarah snatched the folder from him. This is garbage, she screamed, her voice cracking. It won't hold up. We were helping you. We were taking care of everything for your benefit. I kept my voice low, soft but deadly. Helping me? I repeated slowly. You mean draining my accounts to fund your shopping trips? You mean forging a power of attorney and hoping I'd be naive enough to sign it while you were floating around the Caribbean? I stepped in closer. I leaned in just enough so only they could hear what came next. Tell me, Sarah, were you helping me when you tried to take out a second mortgage on a house you never paid a single dollar for? The color drained from her face. Her tan looked cheap now, like peeling paint over a crumbling wall. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Only silence. She just stood there, frozen face to face with the truth she could no longer twist or bury. In that moment, standing in front of the house I had bought not once but twice, first with my savings, then with my dignity, I finally had my answer. I was enough. More than enough. The silence between us was thick, suffocating. Sarah stood there, mouth slightly open, her bronzed glow replaced by the pale ghost of panic. Her entire illusion, built on my sacrifice, decorated with her lies, collapsed under one simple question. And then David broke the silence. He stepped forward, slowly, like a man walking through fog. He raised his hands in front of him, weakly, as though trying to calm a wild animal. The papers shook in his fingers. His voice cracked. Mom, he stammered. We didn't mean for. I held up my hand. Palm out. No more. It was enough to stop him cold. Don't, I said, my voice stripped of warmth. Don't say you didn't mean for this to happen. Let's be honest. You just didn't mean to get caught. My words hung in the air like winter frost. For the first time I truly saw them without their masks. No longer the beloved son and helpful daughter-in-law. Just two frightened people whose entire scheme had just collapsed in front of them. They weren't ashamed. They weren't sorry. What I saw in their eyes wasn't guilt. It was fear. The raw fear of exposure. The fear of consequence. That fear broke them. Whatever shallow bond they'd built on greed and convenience shattered right there on the lawn. Sarah spun on him, eyes blazing, voice screeching with fury. Don't you dare blame me, David. Don't you even try, she shouted, jabbing her finger at his chest. You were thrilled when the money started rolling in. You didn't care where it came from when I paid off your car loan, did you? You didn't complain when I used her money to buy you that fancy golf set. You just loved showing it off at the club. David didn't argue. He didn't even move. He flinched like her words physically hit him. The folder hung limp in his hands. His shoulders, once proud and square, drooped. He looked at Sarah, not with love, not with anger, but with a slow, dawning horror. Like a man waking up in the middle of a nightmare he helped create. Their marriage, the one that had seemed so tightly bound by their mutual lies, was unraveling before my eyes. It was never about love. It was about convenience. A shared mission of manipulation. Now that it had failed, all that was left was the blame. And when Sarah realized David wasn't going to defend her, she turned her fury back on me. Desperation lit her eyes. Her words came fast and wild. We have rights, she screamed. We're family. You can't just sell our home. I didn't flinch. My voice dropped low, controlled. No, I said. This was my home. You were guests. Guests who overstayed your welcome. And with that, I reached into my bag once more, brushing past my wallet and keys until I found what I was looking for. Another folder. This folder was thinner, but in the world we now lived in, it carried far more weight. Inside was the full dossier Mr. Dalton had prepared. A pristine copy of every piece of evidence, every fraudulent charge, every damning document. It wasn't just paperwork. It was a map, one that led directly to their downfall. You're right, Sarah, I said, locking eyes with her. You do have rights. You have the right to challenge me. You can take this to court. I held the folder out like both a peace offering and a loaded weapon. And if you do this, I said, lowering my voice to a whisper, this is what you'll be facing. This is what a judge will see. She stared at the folder like it might bite her. She knew what it contained. The story of her own deception, organized, time-stamped, and legally bound. Her fraud, her theft, her betrayal. It was all there, black and white, ready for the courtroom. The fight drained from her eyes. She looked smaller now, brittle around the edges. I let the silence stretch out. Then I turned to David. He still couldn't meet my eyes. His head hung low, gaze fixed on the cracks in the sidewalk like maybe the answers were hiding there. I took a deep breath. The air felt crisp and pure in my lungs. I'm your mother, David, I said, my voice gentler now but final. I raised you. I loved you. You were my son, and you made me your target. His lip quivered and a faint sob slipped out before he could stop it. This isn't about revenge, I added. The words were for me just as much as they were for them. This is about survival. For decades I lived to protect you. But today, I stood taller. My voice rang clear and strong. Today I'm protecting myself. The folder slipped from Sarah's hand and hit the sidewalk with a soft, dull thud. The pages fluttered in the breeze like broken wings. That neat stack of evidence was now scattered at their feet, visual proof of everything they'd destroyed. And still, Sarah stared at me, her expression twisted with helpless rage. The fear in her eyes had soured into something bitter and petty. She had one weapon left: cruelty. You think you've won, she spat. You got the house back. You got the money. But you're going to die alone, Carol. You'll die in some sad little apartment while we move on. I looked at her for a long moment. The woman who had gladly accepted the gift of a lifetime, then tried to steal the rest. And I felt nothing. Not anger. Not even pain. Only a quiet, deep-rooted pity for the hollowness of her soul. A small, real smile touched my lips. Not smug, not triumphant. Just free. Alone. I said softly, like explaining something to a child. Sarah, I've been alone for years. Even when you were right down the hall. Every time you forgot to call, every holiday you skipped. I was already alone. I held her stare. But there's a difference between being alone and being used. And I'll take alone over exploited any day. That was it. There was nothing left to say. The trial was over. The verdict was in. And their sentence was the life they had chosen. A life without me. I turned my back on them. It was the hardest and easiest thing I've ever done. I walked away, toward my car parked under the maple tree. I didn't look back. I didn't need to see David's broken expression or Sarah's hateful glare. I didn't need to watch them standing there on the sidewalk, surrounded by the wreckage of their greed. Their luggage. Their lies. Their illusion of comfort shattered. I left them behind, along with the house, the lies, and a relationship that was never real to begin with. With every step, I felt the chains they'd wrapped around me. Chains of guilt, obligation, and a mother's blind hope, crack and fall away into dust. I drove home. Not to the house I'd reclaimed, but to the one I'd chosen. A small, quiet two-bedroom apartment that was mine in every sense. That evening I sat on the floor in my new living room, surrounded by cardboard boxes filled with the things I'd decided were worth keeping. My books, my mother's china, the rocking chair my husband had built with his own hands. The room smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings. Like peace. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. The sudden noise startled me. I reached for it slowly. It was a text from David. For the briefest second my heart gave a small, conditioned twitch. But it was just muscle memory. An echo. The message read, "Mom, please. Can we talk? This isn't what I wanted." I stared at it. A desperate plea wrapped in a lie. He wanted the money. He wanted the house. He wanted the easy path I had paved. What he didn't want What he never expected were the consequences. Another buzz. I'm so sorry. Sarah went too far. He pushed me into this. There was the final betrayal. The attempt to rewrite history. The cowardly last move. Throw her under the bus and save himself. I could almost hear his voice. Soft, rehearsed, manipulative. The same voice that used to ask for one more loan, one more favor, one more sacrifice. He wasn't sorry. He was scared. My thumb hovered over the screen. The old me, the one who had died the day of the cruise text, would have answered. She would have cried. She would have believed him. She would have wanted to fix everything. But I wasn't her anymore. I pressed the side button. The screen went black. His words vanished with it. And in that silence I felt peace like I hadn't known in years. I didn't respond. I wouldn't. Because the most important thing my son had ever taught me was the truth he never meant to. You only miss your mother when she tells you no. I drove away from that sidewalk slowly, hands steady on the wheel. I didn't need to rush. They were no longer something I had to escape. They were just gone. A closed chapter. A finished book. I drove through familiar streets, but they looked different now. The oak trees lining the road stood taller. The sunlight felt warmer on my skin. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't a visitor in my own life. I wasn't background support in someone else's story. I was finally free. I was the author now. When I pulled into the lot at my new apartment building, a simple, clean red brick complex, I parked in the space marked just for me. It wasn't a fancy two-car garage, but those painted white lines around Spot 2B felt more permanent, more meaningful than the deed to the house ever had. I climbed the 2 flights of stairs, each step feeling lighter than the last. At my door I slid the new key into the lock. The metallic click as it turned echoed with authority, and when I closed the door behind me, the solid thud of the deadbolt sliding into place was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. It was the sound of safety. The sound of peace. The sound of a life that finally belonged to me. I leaned against the inside of the door and let out a breath so deep, so long, it felt like my body had been holding it in for 20 years. My phone was still in my hand. I walked over to the small dining table, one of the only things I'd unpacked besides my bed and my rocking chair, and I placed it down face down. That simple motion felt like a clean break. For so long that little screen had dictated my emotions, swinging me from hope to heartbreak. Now it was just an object, a tool I owned, not a master I served. I walked over to the window. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, brushing soft orange and lavender across the clouds. Down in the courtyard, I heard the sounds of children laughing, playing tag, their joy drifting up to me on the breeze. It was simple. It was real. It was life, happening without fanfare, without drama. Behind me, my apartment was quiet, peaceful, empty, but in the best possible way. Empty of tension. Empty of manipulation. Empty of hidden traps and emotional landmines. There was no one here I needed to please. No mood swings to navigate. No eggshells to walk on. Just peace. Still and familiar. And mine. Let's make this a space where we really listen to each other. Where your life, your struggle, your joy are seen, heard, and respected. Thank you. Truly. Well, would you like to share your first story with me?